Bob Dylan was a bastard in the second half.
I don't think the spirit of the Dylan songs is being portrayed in this, with this incredibly corny group behind him. I like his earlier records as on his freewheeling LPs, etc., but this I just can't stick.
I think he's prostituting himself.
Makes you sick listening to this rubbish now.
He's just doing what he wants to do, innit? You know, if you don't like it, surely cut out.
He just changed altogether. He's changed from what he was. He's not the same as what he was at first.
The most clueless people in the world have a long, proud tradition of trying to tell our greatest artists how they should make art.
I've discovered that most critics themselves are cinematically illiterate. They don't really know much about movies. They don't know the history, they don't know the technology, they don't know anything. So for them to try to analyze it, they're lost.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is a psychological phenomenon named for professors Mike Dunning and Jay Kruger, in which the less a person knows about a subject, the more they feel that they're an expert. If a person is so ignorant that they're unable to conceptualize what they don't know, they believe they know everything. I think this explains almost all of the internet criticism about the prequels. But so many people hate the prequels, you say. Surely they must have some valid points. Well, no, not really, no. I mean, but let's look at the typical points of people who don't like the prequels. As an example, I'm going to mostly use the painfully typical YouTube critic, Chris Stuckmann.
And when young Boba Fett picks up Jango's head, I always just expected his head to just go like plop, like right out from the helmet. I mean, that's where his head is, right?
No. I mean, no, his head isn't there. I'm not sure why somebody would think that Jango Fett's head is glued to the inside of the helmet or something. Lucas actually provides a shot showing where the head went. I mean, this is the first type of common criticism of the prequels. Things that are just factually inaccurate from people who aren't watching closely.
So why would you send Anakin on basically the most romantic mission ever, in which they have candlelight dinners?
And when I got to them, we went into aggressive negotiations. Thank you.
Aggressive negotiations? What's that?
Now, Jedis apparently are forbidden to love, as this idea was introduced in Attack of the Clones. Jedis can never bang. No love. That's bad. So how are they supposed to fucking procreate? Like, what does that mean? How do Jedis procreate if they can't love? They just look for people to breed with? That's so dumb. How do you create more of your kind?
I mean, does he think the Jedi are a separate species or something? Why does he think that Jedi need to have sex for there to be more Jedi? Has he never heard of the hundreds of Earth religions that have celibate monks? Does he think that a new priest is born when two priests have sex? I mean, what the fuck is he even talking about? Seriously.
But something about that scene always bothered me. He's got a child-sized helmet in the cockpit.
Okay, so Anakin is wearing an adult-sized helmet? I mean, I love this one because, like, forget whether this guy's ever seen a Star Wars movie before. Has this guy ever seen a child before? I mean, how small does he think that child heads are? Children's heads are larger in proportion to their bodies than adults' heads. I don't see how this is confusing. But also, if you watch the movie, I mean, you can see that the helmet is large on Anakin. It's bigger than it is on the adults in the planes. It goes farther down his head. I mean, what the fuck is this guy talking about?
Can you imagine how much better of a scene it would have been if he had to wear an adult-sized helmet and it didn't fit and he had to try to see out of it? It would have been fun. It would have made the scene more entertaining if he actually had to try to fit into an adult helmet. But no, he has the convenient child-sized helmet just there for some reason.
This is really amazing though, because with all the bitching that people did about the kid-targeted humor in the prequels, like, does he honestly think people would have just loved like some slapstick sequence of Anakin's helmet falling off? They would have just loved that, you know. All the people that couldn't handle Jar Jar or any silliness, oh, we need like 5 minutes of Anakin's helmet falling off.
It's these various ideas that could have been in so many scenes to make them better that Lucas never thinks of.
I mean, Lucas came up with the idea of Star Wars, but Chris Stuckmann came up with the Anakin struggling with his helmet idea. So plainly we can see who the greater font of creativity is. You know, I don't understand why Lucas wasn't bringing these geniuses on as consultants, you know? They're so full of good ideas.
If you want to see a good conveyor belt scene, check out Minority Report. Oddly, they both have moments in which our hero gets his arm caught in something, and they both came out in 2002. And Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are friends. Connections?
So, no connection. What is the connection he's implying here? Is he implying that Lucas stole this idea? Is he implying that Lucas and Spielberg worked on the scene together? What is he trying to say about that? Who knows? He's not trying to say anything. He's just babbling with whatever pops into his head. You know, this is what passes for film analysis on the internet. I mean, he does, however, miss the significance of Anakin's arm getting caught right before it gets cut off, of them becoming trapped in a machine, of the foreshadowing of him becoming more machine than man. He misses the fire and hell imagery throughout the scene, which foreshadows Mustafar and the lava. He misses the significance of Anakin's motivation in this scene, which is he's going down into hell to save Padme, who he's been separated from.
We wanted to get this feeling of Padme going off basically towards hell almost. It was really to get the red sense.
When this later happens on a grander scale, it's the same reason for his descent into Mustafar. Chris here misses that the factory is again reminiscent of the underworld in Metropolis that eats up workers to fuel the city above. He misses that Anakin getting swallowed by a machine and pulled along by a conveyor belt, or quotes from Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, which again is about the dehumanizing effect of the factory age and capitalism on workers. He misses that these are both parallels to THX 1138, which is in itself a commentary on the dehumanizing effects in consumer culture. He misses that that was also quoted in this movie's Camino sequences with the clones, so this is, important to the themes of the whole movie. It's drawing a parallel between how the clones are created like machines or like the droid army. Lucas is showing that these are both two sides of the same coin, which is a central theme of all of these movies about, twins and the yin and the yang of things, and that Palpatine is playing both sides, and that war is an illusion to control the masses. I mean, in other words, he misses every single thing that's significant about the scene, and instead he just describes the surface visuals that he's looking at. This is what passes for criticism on the internet. People look at this stuff and they think he's smart and that he's got better ideas about these movies than George Lucas.
During this fight between Obi-Wan and Grievous, though, impressive though it might be, there is a horrifically bad close-up of Obi-Wan where he's just like, oh, I don't think so, and it zooms in on his eyes and it's all like off-center, and I'm like, what? Where did that come from?
Did he really ask where it came from, though? Because if he did, he would have found out that the shots were an homage to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Or, really, if he knew anything about movies to begin with, he would have seen that, because it's a really, really famous scene to reference. This fucking guy hasn't ever seen a Sergio Leone movie.
Well, the other thing he could do is he could pull with his hand. He could sort of, pull it open. Like the gunfighter. Yeah, like Clint would do. Sergio Leone could do it with Henry Fonda, we can do it with Yoda.
And on top of that, this particular reference is actually a really interesting vein of stuff to look into, because the movies are full of references to classic westerns.
What makes a man to wonder? What makes a...
Looks like you two will have a lot to talk about. Come on, Lars.
Yeah, I sold them to a moisture farmer named Lars.
I'm all right.
Boba Fett is popular because he's mysterious and he's powerful, and he's very much like the man with no name from the Sergio Leone westerns.
Lucas especially loves Sergio Leone and doing an homage to classic gunslinger scenes and all the lightsaber duels. And then the same way that Lucas loves to quote Leone, Tarantino loves quoting Leone.
Not so fast. We only got a deal, we trust each other. And a Mexican standoff ain't trust.
Whoa, you need guns on me for it to be a Mexican standoff.
You got guns on us. You decide to shoot, we're dead. Up top, they got grenades. They drop them down here, you're dead. That's a Mexican standoff, and that was not the deal.
Which is interesting because, like Godard, Leone also loved quoting movies himself. Once Upon a Time in the West is a movie that Lucas and Tarantino both love quoting, and Once Upon a Time in the West is, in and of itself, famous for being almost entirely composed of Western tropes and direct quotes from other Western movies. The scene of Han shooting Greedo under the table is commonly considered to be a quote of Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But the scene in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is often considered to be taken from Cheyenne Autumn, and so on and so on. The reason I keep mentioning this stuff is that it's much more complicated than just like Lucas is referencing a shot or a moment that he liked. The references are themselves references. It's part of a lineage of ideas, and with their repetition and variations, these things gather more and more context, and so you can say very complicated things by doing variations on them. It's a language, and it's a language that Chris Stuckmann doesn't speak. I mean, to be fair, Chris doesn't speak a whole lot of English either.
I didn't expect it to be as ponderous as it is about the state of society. And Revenge of the Sith does feel largely resided over.
Jake, welcome.
I mean, but the thing is that Chris doesn't ask the why about anything. This is the whole problem. There's no analysis of why Lucas does things. There's analysis of whether or not he does what the lazy-ass YouTube critic would have done. If something seems strange to them, they don't try to figure out, well, why isn't it the way they would have done it? They assume that that means that it's a mistake, that Lucas fucked up. He didn't do what they wanted him to do.
So anyway, this assassin is after Padme, and rather than just fill her room with gas as she's sleeping, or shoot her or something, a little droid cuts holes into the glass and drops worms, like, into her room? Killer worms? Worst assassin ever! I mean, worms? What?
I mean, this is another example. The movie Lucas is probably most consciously referencing here is Dr. No, because the shots and the position of the bed and everything else in the scene is very similar to that scene in that movie where James Bond is nearly killed by a tarantula. But the idea of an assassin trying to use a deadly snake or an insect to kill the hero is an incredibly famous trope that's been used countless times. The James Bond movies alone use it at least 3 times. It's usually when the person is in the bathroom or in bed where they're most vulnerable, and they're usually going to be killed by either a snake or by a insect, a tarantula, or a scorpion. So Lucas kind of splits the difference. He makes it sort of a centipede thing that's sort of half snake and half insect. But this trope is so famous that in a movie like Murder by Death, which is a parody of mystery and detective movie tropes, they do it twice.
Should I turn off the steam pump?
Not steam. Someone just put deadly snake in room. Wake me when it come near bed.
So I'm assuming it's something that famous, you know, Chris Stuckmann must obviously be familiar with, right? Since he's a film buff and everything. But you know, when people complain about stuff like this, they take me right back to the original reaction to the title of The Phantom Menace. You know, when that title came out, people didn't just say they didn't like the title. They were confused. They're like, what the hell? Lucas lost his mind. This is such a weird title, you know? This doesn't sound like a Star Wars movie. And, you know, the weird thing is not only is it an obvious homage to the type of Flash Gordon serials Lucas has said that Star Wars is based on, it's the most sounding serial name he could possibly have come up with. I mean, if you Google the Republic serials and other serials from the time Saturday matinee serials, there's a Phantom something every year, sometimes more than every year. And, you know, I'm just talking about the serials. It was a popular title for feature films. There were Phantom characters in comics. All that pulp stuff from the 30s, 40s that Lucas is referencing, it was Phantom every 2 minutes. I mean, this Bela Lugosi serial not only has a Phantom title, and then the first chapter has the word Menace in the title. It's the Phantom Menace is the most Star Wars name that could possibly have ever Star Wars. And people didn't understand it. They thought that Lucas must have lost his mind when, you know, it's their own ignorance that's on display. But the thing is that if you saw this name and you thought, well, that's weird, I don't get it, why don't you look and find out? I wonder where that came from. And if you look for, you know, 2 fucking seconds, you'd find the 9 billion Phantom Menace references, the Phantom this and the Phantom that, in serials and comics and everything, you know? And it's obvious because, like I said before, they want you to get these references, you know? Like the reference with the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the eyes, it's such an obvious reference that even if you haven't seen those movies, a shot like Yoda pulling back his robe to get his lightsaber, you should immediately understand that there's a gunslinger flavor, that this is, a duel, a showdown at the OK Corral. You don't have to know every single shot of every single movie, but you do have to have a baseline cultural literacy that, again, Chris Stuckmann doesn't have.
And we get to see what this creature is, and it is a marvel of stop motion. However, today, certain shots don't hold up that well, at least compared to the special effects of the first two films. Usually whenever Luke is on screen and he's obviously looking at a blue screen of some kind, and it just doesn't hold up as well anymore, but the actual stop motion creature, any wide shot of that thing moving, it looks magnificent still. So I came to the pod race sequence and I watched it through adult eyes. Now these are eyes that analyze movies. I like to analyze the way shots are cut together, the way sound is looped through a scene. I like to look at the lighting. I like to look at the way the camera moves. And as I watched this scene, I became aware of something that I've never noticed before. In fact, I've never heard anyone mention ever. Nearly every single shot in the pod race is from the right-hand perspective of the pods, and I would say about 80% of the shots are panning from left to right. Pan from left to right. Left to right. Left to right. Left to right, left to right, left to right, left to right. Shut up! If you think I'm showing the same shot over and over again, I'm not. These are all different shots. For some reason, Lucas never thought to put the camera on the other side of the pods. So you don't get a well-rounded view of this race, and it becomes very stale because you're constantly seeing the same movement happen. Left to right. Left to right, over and over again. I can't believe I never noticed this. I mean, yeah, there are shots like from straight on or from straight behind or a first-person shot, but I think there are maybe 1 or 2 shots that are actually on the left-hand side. It's nuts! I never noticed this before. The entire scene feels stale to me now, and I'm sorry if I ruined it for anybody.
So I watched this clip here several times to figure out if I was missing something, because he's apparently not aware of some seriously basic filmmaking shit here. I mean, just to make a point, I took the following clips from the very first 2 videos I found when I searched for 180-degree rule.
The 180-degree rule refers to an imaginary straight line you draw between 2 subjects in a scene. Basically, you want to keep all of your camera setups on the same side of that line.
A good example of this is going to be a character leaving his house. If the character leaves and goes from right to left, when I cut to another street shot, subconsciously, if I'm showing right to left, you know that that character is going farther away from his house. But when I shift that and have him going from left to right, I can insinuate to my audience that my character is traveling back to his house.
I mean, this is some of the most basic, fundamental stuff there is to know about editing and screen geography.
Now these are eyes that analyze movies.
And so first he's lying about the scene, because most of the shots in the pod race are from other angles. They're in front of the pods, the back of the pods, under the pods. There's aerial shots, close-ups, almost every type of shot you could use. But when Lucas does show the pods from a side view, yeah, he usually sticks to the right side for really, really obvious reasons. I'll use the chariot race in Ben-Hur as an example. The chariots are filmed primarily from the right side because that's the point of view of the main portion of the audience. Even though the track is a circle, when they go to the other side of the track, they're still filmed from the right side of the chariots because they need to keep moving in the same direction on screen, left to right, otherwise it would indicate that they've turned around, reverse direction. When the chariots are shown from the left, it's purposeful. It's either to show them from the point of view of another racer who's facing back toward the audience, or to be disorienting when the chariots have gone off track. In a movie where there's a chase scene that's not on a set course with the cars going in one direction, the camera point of view can jump back and forth to each side of the car, because that creates a sense of confusion. It's deliberate in that case also. It creates the impression that the cars are going back and forth in different directions. It creates a sense of chaos that is purposeful to those scenes in which obviously it wouldn't make any sense in a pod race or a chariot race. And I could keep going point by point through every stupid thing that these people say in these videos, but it's all the same. And there's just thousands more hours of it by other people on YouTube just repeating this stuff. People who don't know shit about Star Wars ranting about Star Wars has become an entire cottage industry. If somebody is just a casual fan and they misunderstood something in the movies, that's bound to happen. But why do people who have made no effort at all to understand these movies create videos purporting trying to educate the rest of the world on them.
Now these are eyes that analyze movies.
You know, what the fuck is that all about? And these videos have millions of views. And anyway, you know, in the end, all these like self-appointed critics are just repeating one another.
So it's almost impossible for me to review this movie without giving a humongous thank you and shout out to Red Letter Media, because their review for The Phantom Menace is quite possibly my favorite movie review of all time. They said everything that's to be said, plus a whole bunch of things no one else ever thought of.
And for all of these people, the Red Letter Media review of The Phantom Menace is like the Citizen Kane of YouTube videos.
They're a bunch of not very bright bitches who ought to mind their own goddamn business.
I mean, you know, it's a video with jokes about killing hookers. It's thrown in every few minutes because they expect their target audience doesn't have the attention span to talk about movies for an hour. And, you know, so of course Star Wars fans love them. You know, I don't want to say your average Star Wars fan is dumb exactly.
When Star Wars opened, it coined the phrase blockbuster, you know, because at the Man's Chinese Theater when it opened in '77, it was going around the block.
But they aren't exactly film historians either. These people who think they need to teach George Lucas how to make movies have this remarkably shallow, incestuous frame of reference, primarily composed of big-budget adventure movies from the last 30 years. And then they just sort of, you know, parrot each other ad nauseum.
You know, it really adds a lot of tension in the movie when the main enemy forces are totally ineffective.
Lifeless, dull battle droids that can be cut in half in an instant provided absolutely no tension.
If you ask me, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi should have been combined to form a new character called Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And in all honesty, Qui-Gon Jinn shouldn't have even been in this movie. It should have just been Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Wait, why is there a child-sized helmet and goggles in the cockpit?
But something about that scene always bothered me. He's got a child-sized helmet in the cockpit.
But we never see the Jedis run fast again. Maybe there never really was a need to run fast again. Oh, yeah, that would have been a good time.
And Obi-Wan should have totally used his speed run to go through the red blaster door area, but of course he didn't.
It's on automatic pilot!
So then George Lucas completely and utterly finally ruined Star Wars forever by having Qui-Gon explain that the Force is microscopic organisms.
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
This entire idea and why this is in the movie is so baffling to me that I cannot even wrap my mind around it. It was never even explored or mentioned in the following two films.
Darth Plagueis was a dark lord of the Sith, so powerful and so wise, he could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life.
And just when he thought that the Star Wars saga couldn't get any more confusing, George Lucas decided to introduce midichlorians into the mix. That's right. Apparently everyone just has little microscopic organisms floating around the inside of their bodies, and whoever listens to them correctly can understand the Force. It's not a mystical thing that binds us together with everyone in the galaxy, it's just these little organisms that live inside our body.
I want you to tell me who the main character of The Phantom Menace was.
But as you watch the movie, I challenge you to figure out who the main character of this movie is.
This movie is told primarily from the Jedi's point of view, but the story that's being told is essentially the story of Queen Amidala and her plight of having her planet blockaded, as in, say, Episode 4, where the story is told through the eyes of the droids, and this one is told through the eyes of the Jedi. From then on, I very purposely kept Anakin sort of on the sidelines. The Gungan and the boy are always kind of, you know, outside in the hallway somewhere. But that is the way it would be. They wouldn't be included in these kinds of meetings. They're kind of puzzled by what's going on. They're standing on the sidelines. It's a little bit a riff on the very first film where the story is told through the point of view of the droids, who were sort of the lowliest characters. And this one, I'm doing it through primarily the two Jedi, but then the secondary characters are also carrying a lot of the weight when the Jedi aren't around, which is basically Jar Jar and Anakin. Because the central story is ultimately the Queen's dilemma. She is really ultimately the central character, and the story they're telling is really her story. When I originally wrote the screenplay for this episode, it was very much like it is now, which is that the story starts with Princess Leia and Darth Vader and sets up the premise of the movie, which is their stolen plans to a Death Star. But once we get past that little piece of exposition, we follow the two most insignificant characters, which are the droids. And this was an idea that I was enamored with that was used by Akira Kurosawa in the film Hidden Fortress, where you take the least important characters and you follow their story in amongst this gigantic intergalactic drama that's going on around them that they don't understand. And I really wanted to have the film be led by the droids. You know, I was sort of amused by that. At the time, it was a very bold idea, again, to have the first half hour be mainly about robots. The only real human character in the first 20 minutes of the movie is Princess Leia.
The Red Letter Media reviews are really proud of this supposed revelation they had about the lack of a main character in Phantom Menace, and then all the second and third generation YouTube hacks like Chris Stuckmann love repeating it verbatim. But you know, it's a question with a really easy answer. This is the kind of criticism you get from somebody who has maybe read some shitty like How to Write Your Screenplay in 30 Days book.
If you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmannized.
And they think that if they spot somebody not following that formula, that they found a flaw in the movie. You know, and of course what Lucas is doing is much more interesting if you actually feel like thinking about it. And of course it also didn't start with Phantom Menace. In A New Hope, most people would probably say that the protagonist is Luke since he gets the hero's journey and all of that. But just like Anakin, he isn't introduced until around a half an hour into the movie. In A New Hope, the larger story is Leia, and we don't really see much of her outside of political situations until much later in the movie. And this is exactly what he did with Padme in Phantom Menace. Luke gets action scenes later in the movie, but he's oblivious to what's happening in the larger story with Vader and Obi-Wan and the Senate and all of that, just like how Anakin doesn't have much of a clue what's going on with Darth Maul or any of the rest of it. You might say Jar Jar's a sidekick, not a protagonist, but he's also the point of view character for the younger audience members who won't understand some of what's going on, just like how the droids in A New Hope were sidekicks, but a lot of the movie was told from their point of view. The stuff that Red Letter Media is complaining about with the multiple protagonists in Phantom Menace is stuff that's been there since the first Star Wars movie.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
The difference is that they're not little kids anymore like they were when they saw the first movies.
I kind of stole one from a little kid, which was kind of cool, but you know. It was Boba Fett, which I love Boba Fett. And like the kid had the last one, but his mom wasn't around, right? So I kind of like rolled up to the kid and I saw he had the last Boba Fett. And like, the kid's probably, what's he gonna do with Boba Fett, really? I mean, so I was like, hey, you know, you're not allowed to take that out of this aisle unless, you know, your parents are with you. And he was like, oh, okay. So he put it down and he went to get his mom, and I snatched it up and ran to the cash register.
You know, and maybe you don't enjoy the prequels, maybe Lucas's tastes are different than yours, and that's a matter of personal taste. You can like whatever you want, but whether or not you enjoy them, the prequels that Lucas made are these astoundingly intricate pieces of work that reference everything from silent films to avant-garde cinema of the 60s. And so if you're like a Chris Stuckmann or a Red Letter Media, and you think the reason you don't enjoy them is because you know more about movies than George Lucas does, I mean, trust me, that's not the reason. You don't. And you honestly, you should really stop saying that because you're just making yourself sound like a dumbass.
It just shows that he doesn't know what's happening in the scene.
Yeah.
Or with the characters.
Or doesn't
it's
care.
amazing.
Or doesn't care what's really happening in the scene.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he's thinking about that specific bit, but not in the context of the overall movie. Like,
so what you're saying is George Lucas has a limited mental focus, a limited intelligence.
The thing is, I haven't seen my mother in 15 years. I don't remember what her favorite colors were, or what kind of flowers she would have even liked.
That's kind of depressing.
That old man's mad.
You said it, Chewie.
I remember when the Phantom Menace Red Letter Media review first came out and started becoming a thing.
is this for something, or what is this?
Yes.
I can't think of anything clever to say.
And people would excitedly tell me about this much-watched video they found, and they would be like, the review is an hour long. Like, the length of the review was in and of itself this amazing proof of the video's quality and deep scholarship.
Anyway, with these fucking Star Wars prequels, I'm always forced to go back to screenwriting 101. And a big four-letter word that comes to mind. Fuck. Nah, I'm just kidding. The word is crap. Nah, I'm just kidding. The word is shit. Nah, I'm just kidding. The word is piss. Nah, I'm just kidding. The word is poop. Nah, I'm just kidding. The word is garbage. Nah, I'm just kidding. The word is tone. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm saying, tone is how a movie feels.
You know, for one thing, I find it really sad that your average filmgoer seems to think that talking about a movie for an hour is an extraordinary amount of thought to put into a movie. I mean, these movies take hundreds of artists years to create, and in the case of George Lucas and Star Wars, his Star Wars series took 3 decades of his life. You know, so why on earth wouldn't there be at least an hour's worth of things to discuss there? It's so weird. You know, I don't actually hate Red Letter Media as much as some people who defend the prequels do.
The kids at school are making fun of me because I'm so fat.
Yeah. When they're talking about something that they actually know something about, they can be kind of entertaining, you know? Mike is kind of endearing when he talks about Star Trek because he obviously has a passion for Star Trek.
I've been trying to lose weight. Nothing works.
And Jay seems to have watched more trashy horror films than most people can find time for in a lifetime. You know, he can tell you anything about that. But these people know about certain specialized subgenres of popular culture of the last 30 years or so.
Are you still talking about Star Wars?
Of course.
That's the information they're working with. They're not film critics. Their Star Wars reviews are just long rants filled with misinformation, no research, and they're targeted at an audience that needs jokes about killing hookers every few minutes to keep them awake. But you know, in spite of having zero insight, reviews like this are vastly popular.
And get Stuckmanized.
People just want to watch this shit to have the same things repeated to them over and over again, like how you rock a baby to sleep.
And get Stuckmanized. And get Stuckmanized. And get Stuckmanized. And get Stuckmanized.
And this is a fundamental problem with what people think the role of film criticism should be. They don't want to be challenged or made to think. They think a good review is one that just agrees with what they already thought or predicts what they will think. As much as I rag on him, Chris Stuckmann seems like he's probably a pretty nice guy, I guess. And I think that's a key to his popularity. If you're a certain kind of, you know, basic bro, you look at this guy and think you could probably hang out with him. He just says everything you already think, and he likes everything you like. He hates the prequels you hate. So it just goes down easy, you know, and thus an internet celebrity is born. I watch and read reviews to learn things and hear opinions I might not have thought of on my own. I already know what my opinion is, so I don't need somebody with a funny voice making jokes about killing hookers and repeating it back to me.
Rape jokes. I love them.
If the reviewer is educated and can support their opinions well, I seek out reviews specifically that I disagree with. Either they'll change my opinion and broaden my horizons, or they'll make me articulate why I disagree with them and I'll understand my own opinion better.
Such an incredibly well-made movie, but I can totally understand how anyone would watch this and say, I mean, it's good, but like, why does everyone say this is the best movie ever made? It's kind of boring. Like, I can totally see people thinking that because it does not follow common story structure. It's not like a enthralling story, so to speak. And you really can't deny the importance and the impactfulness of this film. I'm gonna give Citizen Kane an A+.
Oh good, finally Orson Welles can rest in peace, you know? Because the legacy of Citizen Kane wouldn't have been secure without us knowing what Chris Stuckmann thought of it. I mean, actually his review of Citizen Kane is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here, because in the whole thing he gives no sign that he has any knowledge at all about the history of the film, the technique, why it was groundbreaking, or...
Now these are eyes that analyze movies.
Like any idea at all of why it's so highly regarded. He just repeats again and again that it's well made. But, you know, he's careful to emphasize that he understands if you don't enjoy it because you think it's old-fashioned and boring. I don't know whether he actually doesn't know anything about the movie, but I think it's just as likely that he doesn't get into saying anything intelligent about it because he knows that would be a turnoff to his audience. If he actually showed any sort of passion for movies from the 1940s, they'd think like, oh, whoops, this guy's a pretentious asshole. I guess this channel isn't for me. Better go find somebody as stupid as I am. You know, sometimes the Red Letter Media reviews are so close to making an actual insight that I wonder if they actually know that they're wrong, but they backed off saying something smart because that might have been a turnoff to their viewers.
First of all, forcing someone to sign a treaty sort of contradicts the purpose of a signature on a treaty.
Like, no shit, the treaty would be invalid if they forced her to sign it. The entire point of what Palpatine is doing in the entire movie is to get the Trade Federation to do something wrong so that the Senate will be upset about it so that they will have a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, right? Like, does Mike think that Palpatine was worried about, like, a tax shelter on Naboo or something? If they weren't so busy doing hilarious bits dressing their friends up as hookers, like, they might have got this. They were close. Palpatine wants the Trade Federation to do something that will get them in trouble and start a conflict. What would be the point of them doing a treaty that was legal and valid? To get there from what they're saying takes like one extra second of thinking that they just don't bother with. Like, I'm not really sure if they're too dumb to work out simple things like that, or if they're playing dumb for their audience, but whatever intelligent thoughts Chris Stuckmann might have been withholding about Citizen Kane, I'm guessing that there weren't a lot of them. I mean, this guy is not an expert on filmmaking, regardless of how he might describe himself. Now, like, if you don't understand anything about movies, I'm not going to say that that's fine, because I don't think it's fine. I think that arts literacy is important, and it's a problem that it's something that's not taught in our culture. But I understand that not everybody is an expert on film history. What I don't understand is people giving these faux academic lectures to teach people about something when they themselves don't have a fucking clue about it. There's this video by Patrick Willems that's one of the most egregious examples that I've seen of this. He spends 20 minutes basically to say that the camera moves less in the Star Wars episodes that Lucas directed, and then he makes like a handful of superficial observations that are just factually incorrect.
The aerial battles are where the storytelling sticks the closest to that of the previous films. There are small additions like a crash zoom, and this is a minor thing, but it's also the first Star Wars movie to use a lightsaber as a light source.
But well you have, my old Padawan.
But beyond that, all he has to say is that less camera movement is bad, and he seems to think that subjective point of view shots and like Spielbergian stuff like that is categorically better filmmaking. Of course, what it really isn't better or worse automatically, but much more noticeable so that somebody like Patrick can actually understand what's happening. I talked a lot earlier in this video about how Lucas shoots these movies like documentaries and the thought behind the different types of camera work, so I won't go into that again. But what's amazing here to me is that somebody can make a whole video about the visual language of Star Wars and not go into any of that themselves. In the beginning of the video, there's this segment where Patrick pretends that he's been holed up in this room researching Star Wars so much for this video and that he's gone crazy and turned into a bearded hermit. And it's, funny because the book he's holding is The Making of Star Wars by J.W. Rinsler, which is actually one of the best making of film books ever written. It's funny because if Patrick had actually bothered to read any of the book he's holding right there, he might have had some insight into how Lucas made these films. But then at the end of the video, you find out the actual reason for there to be a bit about him growing a beard is that he's doing a commercial for the Dollar Shave Club.
So you probably noticed that I was a bit of a mess at the start of that video. I was filthy, unkempt, and pretty stinky. And if you're wondering how I got cleaned up so fast, it's thanks to Dollar Shave Club, who were kind enough to sponsor this video.
So, that's what these videos are actually about. They have nothing to do with learning anything or understanding anything. The thing is, if you want to learn about movies, everything I've pointed out so far about film montage and pure cinema and the techniques of visual communication George Lucas is using, you can find all that stuff for yourself online. I remember being younger in pre-internet days, because I'm old, and I would read interviews with Lucas where he talked about his own student films and the films that inspired him, and I would wonder, what could those possibly be like? They were these elusive, mysterious things. And now all this stuff is just here on the internet. A lot of it is free for you to watch anytime you want to, If you're curious about 2187, just go watch it. It's here on YouTube. It's free anytime you want. When I was a kid, something like that was just this mysterious thing that I would never be able to see unless maybe I went to film school someday and I found a class that was showing it, and now it's right there for you to see. And even people making videos lecturing on Star Wars just don't give a shit to find out. Instead of learning something, these videos are about reinforcing your own ignorance and making you feel good for the opinions that you already came into the video with. And, the point is that you smash that like button and maybe buy some razors.
Yes! Oh my god. How do they make this more and more epic every time? How do they make this more and more epic every time?
This is why people talking about this stuff as though it's any kind of valid film criticism or analysis is so obnoxious to me.
Did you not say ever to yourself, well, maybe they had a point with this or with that?
The point is, it's like if you paint your house white and somebody comes along, well, that should be a greenhouse. Well, fine, but I wanted to paint it white. I don't think there's anything wrong with painting it white. I don't think there's anything wrong with me for painting it white. Maybe it should be a greenhouse. But I didn't want it to be a greenhouse. I wanted it to be a White House.
You know, the thing is, George Lucas isn't an idiot. He made The Phantom Menace a kids' movie on purpose, and he knew what the older fans would say, and he knew that some of them would be disappointed. At the time, he said that, you know, the fans are gonna hate it. It's like a Benji movie.
I don't think Daddy understands about us and Benji.
But believe it or not, he had reasons for wanting to do it that way. It was intentional to start out brighter and more innocent and then transition into a darker movie by Revenge of the Sith. That's the way Star Wars movies always have been.
You know, it's hard for people to realize, and I'm not supposed to say this, and I wasn't supposed to say it then, but, you know, it's a film for 12-year-olds.
Older fans like to say that this isn't true, and then they wax nostalgic about the olden days when Star Wars was darker and more mature.
In the not-so-distant future on a planet called Earth, it's Underoos.
Star Wars Boba Fett is here. That means Darth Vader's always near. C-3PO is lots of style. And R2-D2 just makes me smile. Star Wars Underoos are here, yeah! Something out of sight in underwear.
Don't be so ridiculous, R2. Underoos are for Earthlings.
Yeah, remember those serious adult times for Star Wars? You know, what actually happened is that the fans got older but kept liking the same movies, so they want a movie that will make an adult feel like the original movies made them feel when they were a kid. They've built up a lifetime of preconceptions about what they want from the movies. When they were a child, they were more open to new experiences, and that's what made them appreciate the movies better. And I know that's probably something that would be seen as a contradiction with some of what I'm saying so far, because I have had people tell me, you know, how can you say these movies are for children, but then also go on about experimental cinema and Soviet film theory and all this being essential to understanding them correctly. But the thing is that those techniques are actually exactly why kids can love the movies so easily. One of the main reasons the Soviet government was so interested in film theory was that they saw in cinema potential for a universal language. It had the potential to be an excellent propaganda tool. With visual information and music, they could convey the messages they wanted to convey to the largest audience possible, regardless of what language that audience spoke. They were early to identifying cinema as its own language and to understanding the communication potential of it. When George Lucas talks about Star Wars being like a silent film, this is exactly what he's talking about.
But this is the kind of sequence where you can actually turn the sound off and pretty much follow the story and understand that the film is really working as an exercise in moving images more than it is, you know, the dialogue or the more traditional ways of telling a story. All the Star Wars films are really based on the theory and practice of silent movies, and they're designed to be silent movies. It's basically visual storytelling with a musical, emotional underpinning, and that's the way they work. A lot of the dialogue is really more lyrics to a song than actual dialogue that you'd normally see in a movie.
It's exactly because the dialogue is incidental and you can watch the films without understanding it that people react to Star Wars across cultures, across ages in such a primal way.
Watching these prequels again and knowing about the changes they've made to the originals, Lucas has always had a tough time conveying emotion through his characters without just having them say what they feel. He loves when people scream, "No!" or when Padme goes next, "Anakin, you're breaking my heart!" He has this thing where he's like, I need people to say what they're feeling, because you can never actually convey emotion without saying it. I think that's what he struggles the most with in his writing. He's afraid that people are not going to understand what he's trying to convey unless they say it directly to the audience.
Like almost everything that Chris Stuckmann says, the conclusion he comes to is exactly the opposite of what George Lucas is actually doing. The dialogue feels redundant to people because it's not intended to be necessary. The film is meant to work 100% without it. This is also the problem people run into with the acting. People are so conditioned to watch movies that are filmed plays that they expect the dialogue to tell you what the characters are thinking. But in Star Wars, the scenes are edited carefully so that everything you need to know about the characters is there in their facial expressions, their body language, and the other visual information about them with which you're presented. Take a scene where you think the acting is like overdone and watch it in a language you don't speak, and you'll see that everything you need to know about the characters is there in how they're moving, in their facial expressions. And for the amount of information you're being given this way, it's actually done really subtly and it's not overdone at all.
Je n'aime pas le sable. Il est grossier, agressif, irritant. Il s'insinue partout.
Even in a scene where you might think that the content of the dialogue is extremely important, you'll find that the emotional content of the scene is exactly the same without it.
J'en ai dit ce qui est arrivé à ton père.
Oh, il m'en a dit assez!
Il a dit que vous l'avez tué.
Non. Je suis ton père.
Non. Ce n'est pas vrai. C'est impossible.
I mean, the lack of self-introspection in some of these reviews that you find online is amazing, because reviews like Red Letter Media will somehow both complain that the original movies were darker, and then they'll also make fun of how Revenge of the Sith isn't for kids because it's too dark.
Hey, anyone still want to use the excuse that these movies are made for little children? I offer now is the time for you to bring that up. Lucas goes full-on adult audience here.
Star Wars, the original Star Wars, is a pretty gritty film. And,
Star Wars Underoos are here, yeah!
you know, just all the death and violence and murder and betrayal, and they blow up a whole planet of people.
They do.
And then everything else is sort of cartoony crap.
They make fun of Lucas for saying that the movies are for kids, but also including discussions of politics. Like this is some kind of contradiction. The thing is that all these complaints come from adults trying to extrapolate kid opinions that validate their own problems with the movies.
People sitting around going, yes, that's a good idea. Oh, I move for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum. Who gives a shit? Seriously, who cares? This movie was made for kids. You really think they're gonna sit down and watch that? A Senate meeting?
I've heard lots of adults saying the political discussions must be boring to kids, but I've never actually heard a kid say that they were bored by it. The longest scene in the Senate in the prequels, aside from the lightsaber fight between Yoda and Palpatine, is only a couple of minutes, and kids react to political talk the way they react to anything else that they don't completely understand. They gloss over it, just like they would if they were watching a movie in French, and exactly how I reacted to the scenes in A New Hope that I didn't understand when I was a kid.
The rebellion will continue to gain a support in the Imperial Senate.
The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us. I have just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the Council permanently. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away.
It's impossible. How will the Emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy?
The regional governors now have direct control over their territories.
You know, I didn't know what any of that meant, and it didn't matter because the story was told to me visually. I could still tell who the bad guys were. You could tell when they were doing something that created a bad situation for the good guys. The political discussions weren't a barrier at all to children. They were just a barrier to adults who still had the taste of children. You know, kids love the prequels, and kids love Jar Jar even.
You excited for episode 1?
It was better than all of them.
What do you think, Cole? Worth the wait?
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Loved it. Aha! Mace Windu. Haha! Go, man, go! Haha! Oh, God. Clones!
So what did you think of the movie?
I loved it.
When I went to the Phantom Menace reissue in 2012, I sat in the theater in front of a 6-year-old that was patiently explaining the movie to his dad. I'm pretty sure his dad was already a Star Wars fan, but, you know, it was cute, so he let him. You know, when Darth Maul first appeared, the kid gasped, and then he whispered to his dad, he goes, "That's Darth Maul, he's bad." And then when they get to the Jedi Temple for the first time, the kid had this, like, reverential tone, and he goes, "That's Master Yoda."
Yoda.
And then when Jar Jar first showed up, the kid immediately started giggling, and he was like, "That's Jar Jar, Dad, he's funny." That's what the kid said about Jar Jar, and that's what kids think about Jar Jar.
Like that long-eared alien dude, I mean, he always messed up, but he ended up helping his army and stuff. I thought it was pretty good.
Jar Jar is an audience proxy character for children. You know, he covers up his eyes when something scary is happening. He's confused and overwhelmed by the big events around him, as the children in the audience would be. And I think in that function, which is his intended function, Jar Jar is undeniably, obviously a success.
I just don't understand that.
Toujours comme ça. On ne comprend jamais rien.
So you can watch the movies backwards and forwards and find new meanings in how the episodes reflect one another, but there is a correct order to view them in. In case you were confused about it, Lucas put numbers on them to tell you. It's not a mystery. Many things in the prequels were expressly designed to work best if they're watched as they're numbered, as the first episodes of the series. The whole first half hour of Phantom Menace, for example, is mostly devoted to showing you what a Jedi is and what they do, what powers they have, how a lightsaber works, etc., etc. And of course, if you were coming to this movie having already memorized the others, you didn't need to know any of that. I think a lot of the problems people have with the prequels come down to insisting on watching them as the second trilogy, instead of trying to understand that they were supposed to be the first. 3PO being made by Anakin seems like a big coincidence if you go backwards, but watching them in order, there's no coincidence. The two characters started out connected and they later diverged, rather than starting out far apart and then being arbitrarily brought together. Likewise, it might seem odd that out of all the Wookiees in the galaxy, Yoda happens to be friends with Chewbacca, but going the other way, not only does it make sense, it makes more sense than before. Out of the whole cantina, how does Obi-Wan manage to walk up to a qualified co-pilot with a suitable ship on his first try? It's because he knew Chewbacca. Chewie had helped the Jedi 20 years earlier. Not only is this not a mistake, it adds a layer and improves things in the original films. Another reason people have trouble viewing it this way is the idea that the originals will be spoiled if you see the prequels first. Mainly the idea of the "I am your father" revelation being ruined. As with all of these examples, this is people clinging to the way they originally saw the films and what they want the films to be, rather than trying to understand the films that George Lucas actually made. Because if you can make the effort to look at it that way, you would realize that actually it's a much greater surprise to go along in the whole prequel trilogy thinking that Anakin and Obi-Wan are the heroes, and then have Anakin turn and become a Sith. That's a far bigger and more consequential twist than "I am your father."
You gotta remember, this is one movie, and it's meant to be seen 1 through 6. So I think when you watch the actual movie in order, the story will become very clear. When you see the films 1 through 6, it's a very, very different experience than seeing it 4 through 6 than 1 through 3. But the idea of when Darth Vader comes on in episode 4, it suddenly has a huge, powerful effect because you know right from the get-go that that is Princess Leia's father. You know that when you cut down to Luke, you know that that's his son. And you realize that Darth Vader is this pathetic character. He's not this big, all-powerful monster. He's actually a pathetic man who made some wrong choices, who found himself trapped in the world of evil. He made a bargain with the devil, and now he's living in hell. And the only people that can get him out are his kids.
It also happens to make the moment in Empire Strikes Back better, because we've now seen Anakin turn and we know the movies can go there. So you wonder if it's actually possible that Luke will go there too. As a kid, I never really bought that Luke could turn to the dark side. I mean, he was the good guy, it wasn't going to happen. But viewed the other way, it already did happen, and it certainly could happen again.
The problem with one of these kind of movies, it's like Superman or anything else, but if you got a hero who can't be killed, then where's your drama? Well, here, what I've done is said, well, this guy can be killed. Don't worry. He's not the important one. There is another. It's a cheap trick, but it works.
I grew up with the original movies before I saw the prequels too, and so I understand that it's a difficult adjustment to make. But that's the way that Lucas made it, because he wanted the 6 films to work together as a piece, rather than just doing what would be more easily accessible to a certain group of fans who had grown up with the other 3 films first. And he was right, because he knew that eventually, if the films lasted and new generations kept watching them, that the first generation would be in the minority, and it didn't make any sense to compromise how the films worked for every other generation to please that first one. And the thing is, it's always more rewarding to try to understand the piece of art that's in front of you, rather than only understanding your own predispositions. When the prequels were coming out, it was, a fascinating puzzle to me, and I was watching very closely how the structures of the 2 trilogies would tie together. Before episode 2 came out, I predicted to my friends that it would end with a shot of Anakin and Padme's wedding. I said that 3PO and R2 would be there so that it could mirror the shot at the end of Empire, and also because Lucas always says this is all R2's story, so I thought that R2 should be the witness to the wedding. I predicted that episode 3 would end with the shot of Luke being delivered to his family on Tatooine. I predicted that the first shot of episode 2 would contain a camera tilt up to a planet rather than a tilt down. The reason being that every other episode starts with a tilt down, and once Lucas has a rule like that, there's usually one exception as a counterpoint. You can also see that it creates a symmetry with the last shot of Empire Strikes Back, which is the only episode that doesn't end with a group shot of characters. It ends with a shot of a ship. So that while that shot used to be the odd one out, now there are balancing counterpoints at the beginning and the end of the middle episodes of each trilogy.
La mort et la vie sont à l'intérieur d'un même sein. Évidemment oui. Pourquoi?
You go to make a movie and all you do is get criticized and people try to make decisions about what you're going to do before you do it. You know, it's not much fun, and you can't experiment. You can't do anything. You have to do it a certain way. I don't like that. I never did. I started out in experimental films, and I want to go back to experimental films. But of course, nobody wants to see experimental films.
Cinema is an art form with unique possibilities, and I think it's also probably unique in how many possibilities it has that have never been explored. As much as I love movies, I've worked in comics and prose because there's this huge barrier with movies, which is that they're just so expensive. You can make inexpensive movies now, but the visual possibilities of the art form suggest so many possibilities that can't be done cheaply. Saying that anybody can make a movie is like saying that anybody can write a novel, except that you're not allowed to use a third of the keys on your keyboard unless you find financiers who will put up $100 million. The financiers are just there to make money, though, and if interesting experimental movies could make money, they would make those. So the blame really has to go to the audience, who demands to see the same thing over and over. When I've seen something that tries to be different or interesting, like Tree of Life or Upstream Color, the audiences who don't like it don't just say that it wasn't to their taste. They get mad. They feel cheated. Because when they pay for their ticket, they feel that they've entered into a contract to get a certain kind of 3-act entertainment that's something that they will immediately understand. Star Wars managed to break through this barrier because it's also so entertaining, and it taps into things with a very broad appeal, and it uses for its grammar things children can understand. But the audience for Star Wars still wants to pull the artist down into making the movie they want to see, just like the mass audience for any other movie. As indignant as his fans might have got, Lucas still managed to please a mass audience, and also to make this whole other movie that operated on a secondary level concerned with the type of abstract visual communication most audiences aren't interested in. Star Wars isn't the most abstract or experimental movie ever made, but it is the only time that a work with this budget and scale was true to the personal impulses of an artist who was primarily interested in the poetic potential of the medium, rather than just using film as a storytelling delivery system. Big hit movies used to have authors, and now they have corporations. If you're interested in the medium as a mode of expression, you should enjoy the anomaly of Star Wars for what it is, rather than complaining about what it isn't, because at this point, who knows when it'll happen again. With the Star Wars prequels, audiences got 3 vastly more complicated, personal, and esoteric movies than they expected, and it's really sad to me that so many of them just couldn't be bothered.
Savez-vous ce qui transforme la nuit en lumière? La poésie.
Ça va mourir.
Détends-toi, nous ne sommes pas encore en danger.
Pas encore? Des monstères de dehors, une fuite de dedans. Nous, ça coule et sans énergie. C'est quand pour vous ça? Nous sommes en danger.
Ah voilà, ça revient.
Hein? Ah, le gros con revient aussi. Ouh.